when the sun's rays penetrate the dense layer of fog. A view of the city of dusk rose, or, as its inhabitants call it, Raven Ford, opens up. Here, on the shaky line between reality and dream, where shadows and light intertwine in an intricate dance, a gusty wind plays with its streets like a tornado, reflecting the many eras and styles that once lived here. Today it is ivy-covered Gothic towers that soar into the sky, causing awe and vague forebodings. Stone-paved lanes, like guides to other worlds, hide ancient secrets and otherworldly forces. The shadows of Raven Forge stretch their long fingers across the facades of buildings, as if they want to plunge the city into darkness. In the evening, when the city calms down, lanterns illuminate the narrow streets with emerald light, creating impenetrable depths, where each step can lead to the discovery of new secrets or to immersion in forgotten nightmares. The forest that surrounds Raven Ford is an ancient temple of nature. Tall trees with branches like crossed fingers form vaulted arches, under which sounds fade and footsteps freeze. The paths woven with vines lead into the depths, where light penetrates only between the foliage, leaving everything else in deep shadow. Raven Ford is a place where the lines between reality and mystical spaces merge. This is a city where the blood pulsates more slowly, and secrets are played out in every corner. Here you can hear the whispers of spirits and see the reflection of the shadows on the walls. Raven Ford is a world where nightmares come alive and dreams shine, where every step leads to a new path of knowledge and otherworldly revelations. Evan Stanford is an outstanding scientist with a sharp mind who is known for his genius intellect and profound knowledge, possessing a mind capable of penetrating the very depths of the mysteries of the universe. The always charming and self-confident man is used to conquering heights with his genius and knowledge. His name became synonymous with extraordinary achievement and relentless ambition, but within him burned a bright spark of pride that fueled his thirst for recognition and glory. Evan aspired to surpass all his colleagues in order to be recognized as a great scientist whose achievements will transform the world. He believed in his unlimited intellectual power and considered himself unsurpassed. Surrounding himself with educated and influential people, he plunged into the world of scientific research, often ignoring his own interpersonal relationships and rejecting the help of others. His passion for fame and recognition overshadowed his human connection and compassion. His mind and knowledge were outstanding, but his thirst for fame and recognition led him down a dark path that could lead to his own downfall and destruction. Today we will talk about an outstanding scientist named Evan Stanford, whose pride became his curse. Pride permeated every cell of his being. Evan aspired to greatness and rising to the pedestal to defy reality itself. He reveled in his intelligence and accomplishments, despising those who could not follow his steps. This pride was his executioner and seducer, leading him to the very depths of his own fall. The end justifies the means. This is the motto of our brilliant scientist, even when human life becomes the means. Deep in his research, Evan, in an effort to finally solve the mystery that has tormented the minds of scientists for decades, did not hesitate to use unconventional methods for which experimental rats were not enough. By hook or by crook, attracting more and more victims of his experiments, or how he himself called companions, he nevertheless described a new, revolutionary theory explaining the fundamental laws of the universe. And this discovery had the potential to turn the scientific understanding of the world upside down. The scientist easily suppressed petty remorse with the mask of a higher goal. Experiencing genuine excitement and joy, he knew that his labors and research would lead him to this magical moment, when he would witness a higher intelligence penetrating the mysteries of the universe. The words with which he described his discovery shone with the light of truth and sounded like music to his ears. At that moment, everything around seemed implausible, as if he had crossed the threshold of the invisible and opened the door to an unknown world. Sparks of genius flashed in his eyes, and his confidence in his own infallibility reached a peak. Evan knew that his discovery would surely attract the attention of the scientific community and bring him even greater fame. Dreaming of recognition of his genius and that his name would become inextricably linked with this discovery, he believed that this was his destiny, his great mission in this world. However, this bright moment became a transition point for Evan. No one thought at what cost this victory was given. How many innocent souls the scientist ruined in unsuccessful attempts to feed his own ambitions, losing the ability to see his own mistakes in the form of complete impunity. The man closed himself in his perfect world. He was drawn into the whirlwind of sin, forgetting human connections and breaking the hearts of those who believed in him. The art of the mind became his only passion, a fire tearing from within. Confident in his impeccability, he ignored warnings and criticism with each new achievement and triumph, more and more allowing pride to consume him. Together with him, his relationship collapsed, trust and love decomposed, leaving behind emptiness and bitterness. He became lonely, surrounded only by his jagged titles and victories, devoid of warmth and true meaning. Pride took over Evan completely, turning him into a puppet of his own glory. He became a violent destroyer, and his insatiable ambition led to the loss of himself. In a drunken stupor and despair after a series of failures, the great scientist Evan Stanford found himself at the very bottom of his life. He was possessed by his pride, which ruined his career and reputation. Echoes of his own failure rumbled inside his mind, and he felt his world crumbling under the weight of his irreparable mistakes. In the dark and confusing labyrinth of his thoughts, Evan drowned in an abyss of bitterness and self-destruction. The night was shrouded in a veil of sadness, and darkness reigned around him. His soul was wounded and tormented, and he himself was a prisoner of his own pride and self-forgetfulness. At that moment, when it seemed that there was not the slightest hope, a figure entwined with a veil of mystery and mysticism appeared before him. The vision presented itself to him as Sophia, a muse, a source of inspiration and love, which he lost because of his arrogance. The figure, like a ghost from the past, penetrated his mind and heart, making him wince in genuine horror. She radiated a light that penetrated the darkness, and her eyes were filled with sadness and disappointment. This oncoming look went through Evan's very being, revealing all his mistakes, pride, and madness. The ghost smoothly pointed towards the mirror, as if hinting to the man to look into it, and he dutifully fulfilled the will of the creature. Seeing in the reflection a madman washed with someone else's blood, the man felt an inner pain that pierced his soul, and in these terrible moments his own being was naked before him. He saw his arrogance, his cruelty, and his soulless ambition. He realized that his genius was poisoned by pride, and his life was a real hell which he himself created. This ominous moment became a turning point for him, when he realized that all his successes, glory and greatness did not matter before his own moral decay. In desperation, he realized that the only way to heal his soul and rethink his life is to accept his sinfulness and atone for his mistakes. After a terrible epiphany and the realization that his life was poisoned by pride, the scientist decided to correct his mistakes and return everything to normal. Realizing that genius and success are meaningless if they are based on arrogance and destructive pride, Evan begins to make desperate attempts to restore his former life. He goes to meetings with his colleagues and tries to describe to them his experience and theory of the influence of pride on the human mind. He confesses his wrongs and tries to convince them of his sincerity and desire to change. However, his attempts to gain attention and gather support are in vain. His colleagues, who used to respect him, now see him as a fallen genius, as some kind of strange and abnormal person. They reject his ideas and perceive him as a madman who has lost his mind. The next morning, the scientist was awakened by an insistent knock on the door. The man hoped that those behind the door would help him get rid of his pride and return him to normal life, but instead, aggressive people with professionally staged movements threw him to the ground and quickly dressed him in a straitjacket. From now on, the brilliant Evan Stanford has become a patient in a psychiatric hospital, where he undergoes intensive therapy and attempts at healing. However, in the hospital, Evan feels even more isolated and lost. He faces an attitude of distrust and suspicion from the staff and other patients who see him as a scientist who considers himself superior to everyone. He becomes the object of bullying and ridicule, and his genius is perceived as a symptom of his mental disorder. How much he was mistaken in colleagues and friends, the man realized only when he saw the soft yellowish walls around. In pursuit of his arrogant vision, Evan made a series of mistakes and miscalculations that led to serious consequences for his career and reputation, neglecting the criticism and advice of other scientists. Convinced of his infallibility, he personally signed the verdict. All his achievements are now empty shells, and the reputation he so carefully built is destroyed. Pride led him into a web of his own mistakes, and his name has become synonymous with failure. The psychiatric hospital becomes his prison, where he is imprisoned among people who are unable to understand his inner conflict and desire to change. He tries to fight his own demons and get rid of his pride, but he finds himself a prisoner of his own psychic darkness, sinking deeper and deeper into his inner hell. Genius and fame turn into the source of his own downfall. This story is a warning that arrogance and rejection of the opinions of others can lead to death and loss of oneself.